My name is Vanessa. I'm 32 years old, and my stepsister told me I was too plain, too much of a sad sack reminder of her father's first mistake to be allowed at her fairy tale wedding. She wanted me to disappear. What she didn't count on was that I wouldn't just attend her wedding. I would own it. She wanted the perfect aisle to walk down, a grand entrance to her new life, a fantasy she believed she was entitled to. So, I decided to give her exactly what she deserved. The only problem for her was that I was the one walking down that aisle first, holding the deed to her fairy tale castle, right before I had her escorted off my property. It's funny, isn't it, how the people who think you're insignificant are always the most shocked when you prove you're not. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. The roots of this particular poison ivy plant go way back, all the way to when I was 8 years old and my father, Richard, married Brenda. I was the quiet, bookish daughter from his first marriage, a living, breathing symbol of a chapter he was desperate to close. And Brenda, with her perfectly coiffed hair and knife-sharp smile, arrived with her own daughter, Chloe, who was 6. From day one, it was clear how the new world would be ordered. Brenda was the queen, Chloe was her cherished princess, and I was the scullery maid in their grand narrative. My father, a man perpetually terrified of conflict and drowning in guilt, became the court jester and the royal financier, his only goal to keep his new queen happy. He called it keeping the peace. I called it a slow, daily surrender. The first real lesson in my new life came during my 9th birthday party, which I was forced to share with Chloe since her birthday was only a week later. My grandmother, my mum's mom, had given me a beautiful, delicate porcelain music box that played a tune from my favorite ballet. I adored it. Chloe, however, received a pony. A real, live pony, which my father and Brenda had arranged to be waiting in the backyard. Of course, all the children, mesmerized, abandoned my party to flock around the pony. Later, I found Chloe in my room, holding my music box. She looked at me with a smirk, her eyes glinting with a malice far too old for a 7-year-old, and dropped it. The porcelain ballerina shattered on the floor. When I cried, Brenda swept in, hugged a wailing Chloe, who claimed I had pushed her, and told my father I needed to learn to share my things and control my temper. My father, avoiding my gaze, simply nodded and told me to apologize. The broken music box was swept away, and so was my belief that fairness had any place in our home. It was a long, slow education in being invisible, in having my worth determined and then dismissed by people who were supposed to care for me. I learned to build my own world inside my head, a place where competence mattered, and justice wasn't just a word in a storybook. I became the good daughter, the responsible one, the straight-A student. I didn't do it for their approval anymore. I did it for me, as a silent act of rebellion. I would be so self-sufficient, so capable, that one day I simply wouldn't need them at all. And all the while, Chloe skated through life on a cloud of indulgence, her every whim catered to, her every cruelty reframed as a charming quirk. She was the sun, and I was expected to be a pale, forgotten moon, only there to reflect her light and make her shine brighter. It was a dynamic they all cultivated, a family story they told themselves over and over again, the brilliant, beautiful Chloe and her plain, serious stepsister. They had no idea the serious one was paying very, very close attention. They had no idea that every slight, every dismissal, every casual act of cruelty was being filed away, not as a grievance, but as data. I was learning my enemy. I was learning their weaknesses, their arrogance, their profound, fatal underestimation of the quiet girl in the corner. The dynamic solidified and festered throughout our teenage years, becoming a masterclass in psychological warfare with me as the sole, unwilling student. While I was holed up in my room studying for AP exams and meticulously managing a part-time job to save for college, Chloe was cultivating her social empire. She was the queen bee of her high school, a reign built on a foundation of her mother's money and a casual, breathtaking cruelty. She learned to use people as accessories and discard them just as easily. I existed in her orbit as a convenient foil, the before picture to her after. One incident burns in my memory with the clarity of a fresh wound. It was our junior year. I had spent 6 weeks on a history paper about the economic impact of the Silk Road, a topic I found genuinely fascinating. I poured everything into it. Late nights at the library, careful citation, original analysis. I was proud of it. The night before it was due, Chloe had a crisis. Her own history paper, something she'd slapped together in an hour on a topic she couldn't even pronounce, was, in her words, a total disaster. She came to my room, fake tears streaming down her face, a performance worthy of an Oscar. She begged to just see my paper for inspiration. I knew it was a bad idea. Every instinct screamed no. But then my father appeared in the doorway, his face etched with that familiar pleading look. "Vanessa, just help your sister out. You're so good at this stuff. It's what family does." The emotional blackmail was thick enough to choke on. Reluctantly, I gave her a printed copy, making her promise it was just for structure. The next day, I turned in my paper. 2 days later, I was called to the principal's office, my history teacher and a stern-faced administrator waiting for me. On the desk were 2 papers, mine and Chloe's. They were nearly identical. Chloe, however, had turned hers in first, online, the night before. She had retyped my entire paper, changing a few words here and there, and claimed it as her own. The teacher, who had always praised my work, looked at me with profound disappointment. Chloe was called in, and she put on the performance of a lifetime. She cried, claiming I had always been jealous of her, that I must have hacked her email to steal her work because I was desperate for good grades. It was so audacious, so completely backward, that I was stunned into silence. Brenda was called. She arrived like a Valkyrie, defending her daughter's honor, suggesting I was acting out due to a troubled home life from the divorce. My father, when he arrived, simply looked tired. He wrung his hands and said, "The girls have a competitive streak. I'm sure it's all a misunderstanding." There was no defense for me. In the face of their united front, my quiet truth didn't stand a chance. I was given a 0 on the paper and detention for a week for academic dishonesty. Chloe received an A. That evening, I overheard Brenda on the phone laughing. "She's just so clever," she said, presumably about Chloe. "She knows how to get what she wants." That was the moment I stopped seeing my father as a victim of Brenda's manipulation and started seeing him as a willing collaborator. He wasn't keeping the peace, he was sacrificing me to achieve it. My ally, my best and only true friend Sarah, was livid. "This is insane, Vanessa. You have to tell someone, the principal, the superintendent." But I knew it was pointless. It was my word against theirs, and their story was the one everyone was already conditioned to believe. So I took the punishment. I sat in detention. I endured the whispers in the hallway. And I learned a very valuable lesson. A direct confrontation with a liar is a losing game, especially when the judges are already biased. You don't win by yelling the truth louder. You win by changing the game entirely. Our paths diverged dramatically after high school, yet the narrative they had constructed for us remained firmly in place. Chloe, naturally, went to a prestigious and wildly expensive private university in a different state, a move funded entirely by my father's second mortgage on the house. She majored in communications, which seemed to primarily involve attending themed parties and cultivating an impressive Instagram following. Her summers were spent on lavish European study tours. My path was decidedly less glamorous. I attended the state university, living in a cramped dorm room, and working 30 hours a week at a campus coffee shop to cover what my modest academic scholarships didn't. I majored in finance and economics, subjects I loved for their logic and order, for the simple fact that numbers didn't lie. While Chloe was learning how to network, I was learning how to analyze a balance sheet. While she was building a brand, I was building a portfolio, taking the small amount of money my grandmother had left me and making careful, strategic investments. I never spoke of it to my family. My successes were my own, a secret garden I tended in private. To them, I was still just good old, boring Vanessa, working some drab numbers job. Family gatherings during holidays were exercises in endurance. I would drive the 2 hours back home, steeling myself for the inevitable interrogation and comparison. Chloe would hold court in the living room, regaling everyone with tales of her fabulous life, dropping designer names and talking about her influential friends. Brenda would watch her, beaming with pride, while my father would nod along, his face a mask of manufactured cheer. My contributions to the conversation were always met with a patronizing tilt of the head. "Oh, Vanessa, still working at that bank?" Chloe would ask, her tone implying I was personally counting pennies in a dusty vault. That sounds stable. Stable was her code word for pathetic. The condescension was a physical presence in the room. I'd be wearing a perfectly nice professional outfit from a department store, and Chloe, draped in something that cost more than my rent, would say, "Oh honey, we have to take you shopping. You deserve to treat yourself." It was never a genuine offer. It was a public declaration of my inferiority, a way to reinforce her status as the benevolent, stylish princess and mine as the frumpy, clueless peasant. My father would just chuckle and say, "Now, now, girls," as if we were two children squabbling over a toy. He never once defended me. He never once said, "Vanessa is a successful financial analyst who is completely self-sufficient, and we're incredibly proud of her." To acknowledge my success would be to disrupt the narrative, to suggest that my quiet, diligent path was just as valid, if not more so, than Chloe's loud, expensive one. And that was a truth their fragile family ecosystem could not withstand. So I just smiled, a tight, polite smile that didn't reach my eyes, and let them have their story. I ate my dinner, answered their perfunctory questions, and left as soon as I could, the feeling of their judgment clinging to me like a film. Driving home, I'd talk to Sarah on the phone, who would rage on my behalf. "I don't know how you do it," she'd say. I would have thrown a turkey at her head by now, and I'd just say, "It's not worth it." They're not worth it. But deep down, a tiny, cold part of me was keeping a tally. I was learning that the greatest power they held over me was my desire for their approval. The day I truly stopped wanting it would be the day I was finally free. Then came Mark. He was, on the surface, a perfectly nice guy. Handsome in a conventional way, successful in a family business he was poised to inherit, and utterly, completely besotted with Chloe. He saw her not as the manipulative, entitled person she was, but as the dazzling, confident woman she pretended to be. He became her greatest enabler, the mirror that reflected her own inflated self-image back at her. Their engagement was, of course, an extravaganza. Mark proposed on a private yacht at sunset, a moment Chloe live-streamed to her thousands of followers. The ring was a rock the size of a small planet. The announcement to the family was made at a lavish dinner at the most expensive restaurant in town, a place I could now technically afford but would never go to on principle. Chloe was incandescent, flashing her ring like a weapon. "I'm finally getting my happily ever after," she declared, looking not at Mark, but at her mother. The wedding planning began instantly, and with a terrifying intensity. It wasn't a celebration of love, it was a military campaign with Chloe as its 5-star general. The watchwords were fairy tale, exclusive, and unforgettable. No expense was to be spared, no detail too small for her obsessive focus. My father, of course, was footing a significant portion of the bill, a fact Brenda reminded everyone of constantly, as if it were an act of profound generosity, rather than the fulfillment of Chloe's lifelong entitlement. I tried to keep my distance, offering polite, non-committal congratulations, and then attempting to fade into the background, but Chloe wouldn't allow it. She needed her audience, and more importantly, she needed her foil. She insisted I be a bridesmaid. I knew this was not an olive branch, it was a power play. It was a way to keep me under her thumb, to subject me to endless dress fittings, cake tastings, and floral discussions where my opinion would be requested and then immediately ridiculed. I tried to decline gracefully. "Chloe, I'm so honored, but my work schedule is just so demanding right now. I don't think I could give your special day the attention it deserves." Her smile was sickly sweet. "Oh, don't be silly, Ness. It'll be fun. Besides," she added, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was loud enough for her mother and my father to hear, "I need you. You keep me grounded." It was a perfectly crafted trap. If I said no again, I would be the ungrateful, unsupportive stepsister, sabotaging her happiness. My father gave me that look again, the one that said, "Just do it. For me. For the peace." So I agreed, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. I called Sarah on the way home, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. "She's making me a bridesmaid. I said, my voice flat. Sarah let out a long groan. Oh, you poor soul. This is going to be a masterclass in public humiliation. She wasn't wrong. She also planted a seed of an idea, though I didn't recognize it at the time. You know, she mused, the thing about fairy tales is that they always have a villain. She's so focused on being the princess, she's not paying any attention to who else is in the story. Her words stuck with me, a tiny flicker of something dangerous and enticing in the back of my mind. Chloe was casting a fairy tale, and she had already cast me in a role. Little did she know, I was about to start rewriting the script. The bridesmaid dress fitting was the first major battle in a war I didn't even want to fight. It was held at a chic, minimalist boutique with champagne on tap and judgmental-looking staff. Chloe had assembled her bridal party, 2 of her sorority sisters, who were basically carbon copies of her, and her cousin, and then there was me. Chloe had pre-selected a dress, a horrifying creation in a shade of dusty rose that made me look vaguely ill. It was a slinky, unforgiving slip dress that seemed specifically designed to highlight every perceived flaw. Her other bridesmaids, all tall and willowy, looked like goddesses in it. I, with my more athletic build and practical, sensible bra-requiring chest, looked like a sausage casing. As I stepped out of the dressing room, the silence was deafening. Then Chloe burst out laughing, a high, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, Vanessa," she gasped, clutching her stomach. "That is not it." The other bridesmaids giggled behind their hands. Brenda, who was lounging on a velvet settee, chimed in. "Well, it's not the dress's fault, dear. It's just not suited to your figure." The sales associate looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. I felt a hot flush of shame creep up my neck. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. I just stood there, mute, as Chloe walked around me, poking and prodding as if I were a piece of livestock. "Maybe we can let it out here, or add some kind of shawl, like a big one?" she mused, her voice dripping with mock concern. The entire performance was for the benefit of her audience, a public reinforcement of the family narrative. See, plain, awkward Vanessa. She just doesn't fit in our beautiful world. My father, who had been coerced into coming to see his girls, just shifted his weight uncomfortably by the door. "I'm sure you'll find something that works," he mumbled, his eyes fixed on a point on the far wall. He was a ghost at the feast, present in body but entirely absent in spirit. It was in that moment, standing on that plush grey carpet under the harsh boutique lighting, that something inside me finally snapped. It wasn't a loud, dramatic break, but a quiet, clean shearing of a cord that had been fraying for 20 years. The cord of hope. The hope that one day they would see me, that they would value me, that they would defend me. It was gone, and in its place was a strange, cold calm. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, past the ill-fitting dress, and met my own eyes. I saw not a victim, but a fool for having endured this for so long. I went back into the dressing room, changed back into my own clothes, and walked out. I didn't say a word. I just picked up my purse. Chloe, momentarily surprised by my agency, blocked my path. "Where are you going? We're not done torturing you yet," she said, trying to make it a joke. I looked her dead in the eye. "Find another dress. Let me know what it is. I'll have it tailored." My voice was flat, devoid of the emotion she craved. I walked out of the store, leaving a stunned silence in my wake. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just drove, my mind working with a chilling clarity. The game had changed because I was no longer playing for their team. I was playing for mine. The war wasn't over, but I had just chosen a new strategy. Not defense, offense. The final straw, the catalyst that turned 20 years of simmering resentment into a cold, hard plan, came 2 weeks later. It was a Tuesday night. I was at home, enjoying a rare, quiet evening, analysing some market trends for a personal investment when my phone buzzed. It was Chloe. I let it go to voicemail, not having the energy for whatever drama she wanted to stir up. A minute later, it buzzed again and again. On the 4th call, I sighed and answered, putting it on speaker. "What's wrong, Chloe?" I asked, my tone weary. Her voice was syrupy sweet, a tone she only used when she was about to deliver a particularly nasty blow. "Ness, hi. So listen, we need to talk about the wedding. I waited. Mark and I were talking, and my mum agrees, and we've decided that, well, it's just not going to work for you to be in the wedding party anymore. I wasn't even surprised. Relieved, actually. Okay, I said, that's fine. I can just come as a guest. There was a pause, and I could practically hear the smirk forming on her face. Well, that's the other thing, she said, drawing out the words. We've decided it would be best if you didn't come at all. The words hung in the air, cold and sharp. I said nothing, my mind processing the sheer audacity. She took my silence as weakness and plunged the knife deeper. It's just, you know how you are. You're so serious, and you have this sad energy about you. And my wedding is supposed to be the happiest day of my life. It's my fairy tale, Vanessa. And you're a sad sack reminder of my father's first mistake. You just don't fit the aesthetic. A sad sack reminder of her father's first mistake. She had finally said it. The unspoken truth that had underscored our entire relationship for 2 decades, now laid bare in a casual, cruel sentence. I can't have you in the pictures, looking all drab and depressed, she continued, her voice gaining momentum. People will think something is wrong. You bring everyone down. This is about me, and my day, and my perfect new life. You understand, don't you? It's not personal. It's not personal. The classic mantra of the bully who wants to inflict pain without consequence. Every word was a carefully chosen weapon, designed to diminish, to isolate, to erase me. I felt a surge of white-hot anger, so pure and so intense it almost took my breath away. But my voice, when I finally found it, was chillingly calm. I see, I said. You're banning me from your wedding because I'm not decorative enough. Her fake laugh tinkled down the line. Exactly. Oh, I knew you'd get it. You're always so practical. Thanks for being so understanding, Ness. I'll have Dad send you some pictures. And she hung up. I sat there in the silence of my apartment, the phone still in my hand. The anger didn't fade. It crystallized. It solidified into something hard and clear and powerful. For years I had absorbed their toxicity, their casual cruelty, their dismissiveness. I had made myself smaller to make them comfortable. I had accepted their narrative of me, no more. The fairy tale she was so obsessed with. It was about to get a new character. Not a sad sack stepsister. Not a drab background extra. A dragon. And I was going to burn her castle to the ground. The rage didn't dissipate into tears or helpless frustration as it might have in the past. Instead, it settled deep in my bones, a cold, dense fuel. The first person I called was Sarah. I relayed the conversation with Chloe, my voice a monotone as I repeated the words, a sad sack reminder of her father's first mistake. For a few seconds, Sarah was silent, and I knew she was absorbing the full, calculated cruelty of it. Then she spoke, and her voice was steel. Okay, she said, her tone sharp and focused. That's it. The line has been crossed, obliterated, and nuked from orbit. So, what are you going to do, V? Are you going to let her win? Are you going to sit at home on her wedding day and look at the pictures she so graciously sends you? Or are you going to take that brilliant, beautiful, analytical brain of yours, and you are going to absolutely ruin her? Her words were like a lit match in a room full of gasoline. She wasn't offering sympathy, she was offering a war cry. She was validating the anger and giving me permission to use it. Don't get mad, Vanessa, she said, her voice dropping lower. Get even. No, screw even. Get everything. Get everything. The phrase echoed in my mind. For my entire life, I had been taught to want less, to take up less space, to be content with the scraps they threw me. The idea of taking everything was so audacious, so foreign, it was exhilarating. We stayed on the phone for an hour, not just complaining, but brainstorming. It started as a joke. What if you crashed the wedding? Sarah suggested. No, too obvious. What if you hired a skywriter to write Chloe is a monster over the venue? We laughed, but underneath the laughter, an idea was forming. The venue. Chloe had been insufferable about the venue. She had talked about it non-stop for months. It was a place called the Willow Creek Manor, a gorgeous old estate with sprawling lawns, a historic ballroom, and a picturesque stone chapel. It was the centerpiece of her fairy tale. She loves that place more than she loves Mark, I mused aloud. And then, the flicker of an idea I'd had before ignited into a full-blown inferno. My background wasn't in party planning, it was in finance. I didn't know how to ruin a party, but I knew how to read a prospectus. I knew how to find the cracks in a foundation, both literally and metaphorically. "What do you know about the Willow Creek Manor?" I asked Sarah, my voice suddenly serious. "Just what you've told me. It's pretty, old, and expensive," she replied. "Hold on," I said, my fingers already flying across my keyboard. I pulled up the county's property records, then state business filings, then news archives. I was in my element now. This was my world. This was the language I spoke. "It's a private business, owned by a family trust," I murmured, scanning the documents. "The Henderson family. They've owned it for 3 generations. The fairy tale had a name. And as I dug deeper, I started to see that this particular fairy tale was in deep, deep trouble. My heart began to beat faster, a steady, powerful rhythm. This was no longer about revenge. This was about a hostile takeover. My apartment, usually a sanctuary of calm, transformed into a war room. For the next week, I barely slept. Fueled by caffeine and a righteous fury, I dove headfirst into a deep financial investigation of Willow Creek Manor LLC. The picture that emerged was grimly beautiful. The manor was a classic case of a legacy asset bleeding money. The Henderson family, the 3rd generation to own it, clearly loved the place's history but had no idea how to run a modern hospitality business. Their online presence was archaic, their marketing non-existent, and from the few online reviews I could find, their service was suffering. They were asset-rich and cash-poor, propping up an unprofitable business with family money that was clearly running out. I cross-referenced property records with court filings, and there it was. The smoking gun, a series of tax liens filed by the county over the last 18 months. They were behind on their property taxes, and not by a small amount. Next, I found records of 2 lawsuits from major vendors for unpaid invoice as a catering supplier and a high-end linen company. This was a business on the brink of collapse. They were desperately trying to stay afloat, likely taking in big deposits for events like Chloe's just to make payroll for the previous month. They were a house of cards, and a strong gust of wind would bring it all down. A gust of wind I was more than happy to provide. The plan began to form in my mind, elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its potential execution. I wasn't going to crash the wedding. I was going to buy the stage it was set on. I spent the weekend drafting a preliminary proposal, outlining a cash offer for the entire estate, the land, the buildings, the business, and all its assets and liabilities. My offer would be just enough to solve all their problems, to pay off their tax debts, settle their lawsuits, and leave the Hendersons with a comfortable, clean exit. It was a lifeline. But it would come with strings. Specifically, a non-disclosure agreement of epic proportions and a clause that all existing event contracts must be honored under the new management. My management, the beauty of it was the anonymity. Chloe, Brenda, and my father would have no idea. They would continue planning, paying their deposits, and making their demands to a business that was, for all intents and purposes, already mine. They would be walking into a trap of their own making, a gilded cage whose key I held in my pocket. The schadenfreude was so potent it was almost a taste in my mouth. I imagined Chloe, in her ridiculously expensive dress, barking orders at a staff that was secretly taking their direction from me. I imagined Brenda complaining about the temperature of the champagne, unaware that I had personally approved the vendor order. The dramatic irony was a dish I was going to savor for months. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of profound, exhilarating power. They had written me out of their story, so I was going to buy the publishing house. With a meticulously prepared file and a heart full of cold, hard resolve, I made an appointment with a man named Arthur Davies. Mr. Davies was a senior partner at a top-tier corporate law firm, a man whose reputation was built on his ability to be both a shark and a ghost in negotiations. He was exactly what I needed. I had met him once, years ago, at a university alumni event where he had given a lecture on strategic acquisitions. I had been impressed then, and I was counting on him now. I walked into his mahogany-paneled office feeling a strange mixture of intimidation and determination. He was an older man with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through you. He listened patiently, without interruption, as I laid out the entire story. I started with the family dynamics, the years of quiet slights, culminating in the phone call from Chloe. I then seamlessly transitioned into the financials of the Willow Creek Manor, presenting my research, the tax liens, the lawsuits, and my proposed plan of action. I handed him the file. He spent a full 10 minutes reading, his expression unreadable. When he finally looked up, he didn't offer sympathy. He offered something far better: respect. "Miss Evans," he said, his voice a low rumble. "This is either the most elaborate, brilliantly conceived revenge plot I have ever encountered, or it is a very shrewd business acquisition disguised as one. Frankly, I don't care which it is. Your research is impeccable." A wave of validation washed over me, so powerful it almost made me dizzy. This man, this titan of his field, saw my competence. He saw my value. "So," he continued, leaning back in his leather chair, "you want to create a blind LLC to act as the purchasing entity. You'll fund it through your personal investment portfolio. We will make an all-cash offer, contingent on a swift, silent closing and an ironclad NDA for the sellers." He was reciting my plan back to me, but in his mouth. It sounded less like a dream and more like a certainty. "There is, of course, a significant risk," he warned. "The Hendersons could reject the offer. They could leak the sale. Your stepsister could find out." "She won't," I said, with a confidence that surprised even me. "Her arrogance is my greatest asset. She is so consumed with her own fairy tale that she's incapable of imagining a world where she is not the main character. She won't be looking." Mr. Davies allowed a small, thin smile to cross his lips. "Hubris, it's the downfall of many a great empire, and many a bridezilla, I imagine." He picked up his phone. "All right, Ms. Evans, let's get to work. I'll have my team draft the incorporation documents for your new holding company. Do you have a name in mind?" I thought for a moment, a grim sense of humor bubbling to the surface. I thought about Chloe's words. A sad sack. A mistake. "Yes," I said, "let's call it Second Act Holdings, LLC. Mr. Davies chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. "I like it. Very well, let's go buy you a castle." Leaving his office, I felt taller. The world seemed sharper, more vibrant. The game was afoot. The next few weeks were a masterclass in compartmentalization. By day, I was Vanessa Evans, a diligent and somewhat quiet financial analyst at my firm. I completed my projects, attended meetings, and engaged in polite office chatter about the weather. But by night, and in every spare moment in between, I was the phantom CEO of Second Act Holdings, LLC. The negotiation with the Henderson family, conducted entirely through Mr. Davies, was a delicate dance. He was magnificent. He presented our offer not as an aggressive takeover, but as a respectful, dignified solution to their troubles. He spoke of preserving the manor's legacy, of investing in its future, all of which was true, though he conveniently omitted the primary motivation behind the acquisition. The Hendersons, as I had predicted, were backed into a corner. Our all-cash offer was a godsend, a clean break from a business that was drowning them. After a brief, tense period of negotiation over the final price, they accepted. The relief in their acceptance was palpable, even through the legal documents. The non-disclosure agreement we drafted was a work of art. It was so restrictive, so airtight, that if the Hendersons so much as breathed a word about the sale to anyone before a date, we specified the day after the wedding, they would face financial penalties so severe it would wipe out their entire settlement. They signed without hesitation. The most surreal part of this whole process was the parallel communication I was having with my family, while Mr. Davies was finalizing the purchase of a multi-million-dollar estate on my behalf. I was receiving texts from Brenda with seating chart dilemmas. "Vanessa, do you think your Aunt Carol will have an aneurysm if we put her at a table with Richard's cousin? You know how she is." I would text back bland, helpful suggestions, my fingers typing one message while my eyes scanned a legal document on my laptop screen. The dramatic irony was a constant, private source of amusement. The peak of this bizarre duality came one Thursday afternoon. I was on a conference call with Mr. Davies, and the bank, authorizing the final wire transfer that would make me the official owner of the Willow Creek Manor. As the transaction was being confirmed, my personal phone rang. It was Chloe. I muted the conference call. "Hey," I said, my voice betraying none of the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Oh my God, Ness, you will not believe the day I'm having," she wailed. "The manager at the manor, this guy named Bob, is being a total troll. I asked for a very simple thing. I want them to import a specific type of orchid from Hawaii for the centerpieces, and he had the audacity to talk to me about supply chains and budgets. Can you believe it?" I listened to her rant for 5 minutes about the incompetence of the staff at the venue I had just, not 30 seconds ago, officially purchased. "It's my dream, Vanessa," she cried. "Why is it so hard for people to just do their jobs and give me my perfect day?" In the background of my other line, Mr. Davies's voice cut through. "The transfer is complete, Miss Evans. Congratulations. You are now the proprietor of the Willow Creek Manor." I felt a jolt, a dizzying surge of power. I took a slow breath. "That sounds really frustrating, Chloe," I said into my phone, my voice dripping with false sympathy. "I'm sure it will all work out. You deserve your perfect day." I hung up and unmuted the conference call. "Thank you, Mr. Davies," I said, my voice steady. Now, about the current general manager. The game had just reached a whole new level. With the deed to the Willow Creek Manor safely secured in a vault under the name of Second Act Holdings, my role shifted from acquirer to secret operator. The first order of business was to manage the existing staff, particularly the beleaguered general manager Bob, whom Chloe had been tormenting. Through Mr. Davies, I issued a new set of directives. The official story for the staff was that the manor had been acquired by a quiet, hands-off investment firm that wished to remain anonymous. Their jobs were secure, provided they followed all new protocols. The most important protocol: all communications regarding the upcoming Evans-Markham wedding were to be logged and reported back to Mr. Davies, who would then forward them to me. Furthermore, they were to grant the bride, Miss Chloe Evans, her every request, no matter how absurd. The Hawaiian orchids, source them, overnight them if you must. The champagne she insisted on, the one that was twice the original budget, procure it. The demand for a flock of white doves to be released as she kissed the groom, book the doves. The instruction was simple. Bill everything to the client's running tab, a tab I knew my father was paying, and tell her, "Absolutely, Miss Evans. We can certainly make that happen." My strategy was twofold. First, it would lull Chloe into a state of supreme, unassailable confidence. Her world was bending to her will, confirming her belief that she was the center of the universe. Second, it was running up an astronomical bill. Every whim, every bit of theatrical nonsense she demanded, was being meticulously documented, creating a second smoking gun to be deployed alongside the deed. The reports I received from Bob via Mr. Davies were better than fiction. Chloe had demanded the entire east lawn be resodded 2 weeks before the wedding because she didn't like the particular shade of green. She had insisted the water in the decorative fountains be replaced with sparkling mineral water because she felt it would catch the light better. She had submitted a 20-page document detailing the precise emotional arc she expected from the string quartet. It was madness, but it was magnificent, well-documented madness. I had to make one secret, late-night visit to the property. I told my father I was going on a weekend hiking trip. I drove out to the manor after midnight, using the key the old owners had left for me. Walking through the silent, moonlit halls of my property was an experience I will never forget. I stood in the grand ballroom, the site of so many of Chloe's future boasts, and felt a profound sense of ownership, not just of the physical space, but of my own destiny. I ran my hand along the polished wood of the chapel pews. This was the aisle she thought she was entitled to. A righteous, cold anger solidified within me. She had banned me from this place. She had deemed me unworthy to even witness her triumph. But there was no corner of this place she could go, where she was not, in fact, my guest. A guest whose invitation was about to be rescinded in the most public way imaginable. It was during this period that I felt my last emotional tie to my father truly sever. He called me one evening, his voice heavy with false bonhomie. "Ness, honey, I was just talking with Chloe," he began. "She's so stressed with this wedding. And, She feels terrible about the misunderstanding. Maybe you could just give her a call, apologize for the tension and wish her well. It would mean the world to me. Apologize. He wanted me to apologize for being uninvited to the wedding, for being verbally abused, for having my very existence deemed an inconvenience. No, Dad, I said, my voice flat and final. I will not be doing that. The silence on his end of the line was heavy with disapproval. I just don't understand why you have to be so difficult, Vanessa, he finally said, his voice laced with frustration. Can't you just let it go for the sake of the family? What family? I asked, the question genuine, and for the first time in my life he had no answer. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a strange, tense tightrope walk. My secret was a heavy, precious stone I carried everywhere, and there were moments I feared I would drop it. The closest call came from my father. My refusal to make peace with Chloe had clearly unsettled him. Not because he was concerned for my well-being, but because it disrupted his carefully constructed illusion of a happy, blended family. He showed up at my apartment unannounced one Saturday morning, a tactic he'd never used before. I was in the neighborhood, he said, a lie so transparent it was almost insulting. He came in, looking around my clean, minimalist space with a critical eye, as if searching for clues to my newfound defiance. Look, Vanessa, he said, getting straight to the point. I know you're upset with Chloe. She can be a lot, but she's your sister. She's my stepsister, I corrected him gently. And she banned me from her wedding. He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. She was just stressed. You know how brides get. And your mother Brenda's just trying to support her. It's a big deal for them. It seems to be a big deal for you too, I said, my voice even. You're paying for a significant portion of it. He flinched. I want Chloe to be happy. Is that so wrong? It's not wrong to want her to be happy, Dad. It was wrong to stand by for 20 years while she and Brenda made me miserable. It was wrong to let them treat me like a second-class citizen in my own home. And it was wrong to ask me to apologize for being the one who was hurt. The words hung in the air between us, stark and undeniable. He looked at me, really looked at me, and for a second I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Was it guilt? Regret? But it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by his usual defensiveness. You've been different lately, Vanessa, he said, changing tactics. You seem distracted, secretive. Sarah mentioned you're working on some big project. Is everything okay with your job? The question was a probe, an attempt to find a weakness, a problem he could solve to restore the old order. My heart hammered in my chest. This was it, the moment of truth. I had to hold the line. I gave him a small, placid smile. Everything is wonderful, Dad. The project is just a personal investment strategy that's taking up a lot of my time. It's actually going very, very well. I projected an aura of serene success, of boring financial stuff that he had never been interested in. It was the perfect camouflage. He didn't know how to engage with this version of Mitha, one who wasn't asking for anything, who wasn't wounded, who was perfectly, calmly content. He left soon after, looking more confused than when he arrived. The encounter, while stressful, was empowering. I had faced him down without revealing a thing, using the very persona they had assigned to Meath boring, practical numbers girl as my shield. He thought he was looking at the same old Vanessa. He had no idea he was looking at the new owner of his daughter's wedding venue. The final week was a blur of logistics and rising tension. My days were spent wrapping up my projects at work, preparing for a vacation I had told my boss I was taking. My evenings were a flurry of activity. I had a final meeting with Mr. Davies to go over the day of plan. We had a binder, thick and meticulously organised, with every detail accounted for. It contained copies of the deed, the articles of incorporation for Second Act Holdings, the signed NDA from the Hendersons, and the itemised, jaw-droppingly long invoice for every one of Chloe's last-minute whims. This, Mr. Davies said, tapping the binder with a bony finger, is the sword of Damocles, and it is ready to fall. I also had a discreet meeting with the head of a small, professional security firm. They weren't burly, obvious bouncers, but sharp, well-dressed men and women who specialized in corporate event security. Their instructions were simple: arrive early, blend in, and await my signal. Their primary job was not to intimidate, but to facilitate a calm, orderly and non-negotiable removal of any individuals I identified as trespassing. I spent an entire afternoon selecting my outfit. I knew I wouldn't be wearing a dusty rose bridesmaid dress. I chose a bespoke suit, a deep charcoal grey that was almost black, tailored to perfection. Underneath, a simple silk shell in a steely silver. It was armor. It was the uniform of a CEO, of a woman in complete control. It was the antithesis of the sad sack Chloe had branded me. Every detail was a declaration of intent. The days crawled by, each one filled with a fresh absurdity from the wedding front. Chloe had decided, 3 days before the wedding, that she needed a string quartet to play modern pop songs, and she sent the manor staff a frantic list of arrangements they needed to learn immediately. Bob, the manager, dutifully hired a second quartet at great expense and assured her it would be handled. My father called to tell me the bill for the flowers had come in and was almost double the estimate, his voice tight with stress. I murmured some vague sympathies, the picture of detached concern. "Well, Dad," I said, the irony thick enough to taste, "I guess that's the price of a fairy tale." The schadenfreude was becoming so intense, it was almost a physical sensation, a hum of energy beneath my skin. I was building a stage, setting the lights, and hiding in the wings, waiting for the star of the show to take her place so I could bring the whole production crashing down. This wasn't just about Chloe anymore. It was about Brenda's smug superiority. It was about my father's willful blindness. It was about every teacher, every family friend, every person who had ever accepted their narrative and dismissed mine. The wedding wasn't just a party. It was a tribunal, and I was about to act as judge, jury, and executioner. The night before the wedding, a strange calm descended upon me. The planning was done. The pieces were in place. There was nothing left to do but wait for the dawn. I poured myself a glass of expensive whiskey, a small luxury I'd allowed myself recently, and sat in the dark of my living room. I thought about calling Sarah, my rock through all of this, but I knew I needed to face this final moment of reflection alone. Was I going too far? The question echoed in the quiet space. Was this level of elaborate, calculated destruction justified? Was I becoming the monster I was trying to slay? I let the question sit there, examining it from all angles. I thought about the little girl whose porcelain music box was shattered, who was then forced to apologize. I thought about the teenager publicly shamed and academically punished for a crime she didn't commit. I thought about the young woman standing in a boutique, being mocked for her body by the very people who were supposed to protect her. I thought about every patronizing comment, every dismissive glance, every single time I was made to feel like I was less than. The anger was still there, a pilot light that had been burning for 2 decades. But it wasn't a wild, uncontrolled fire anymore. It was a focused, contained energy. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a calculated, strategic response to a lifetime of aggression. It was the logical conclusion of an untenable situation. My phone buzzed on the table beside me, pulling me from my reverie. It was a text from Chloe. I opened it, my heart giving a steady, rhythmic thump. It was a picture of her, clinking a champagne glass with Brenda and her bridesmaids. They were all laughing, their faces flushed with excitement. Underneath the picture, a message. "Thinking of you tomorrow while I'm living my dream. Hope you're not feeling too left out. Try not to be too miserable. XO." And there it was. The final, perfect piece of evidence. The last twist of the knife, delivered with a casual, smiling cruelty. She wasn't just content to have her perfect day. She needed me to be miserable during it. My happiness diminished hers, and my sadness enhanced it. Any lingering doubt I had evaporated like mist in the morning sun. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about reclamation. She had spent a lifetime trying to define me, to put me in a box labeled less than. Tomorrow, I wasn't just going to break the box. I was going to dismantle the factory that built it. I wasn't destroying her fairy tale. I was ending a horror story and finally writing my own first chapter. I took a sip of my whiskey, the warmth spreading through my chest. Then I sent a single text message to Mr. Davies and the head of my security team. "We are a go for tomorrow. Execute plan as discussed. No deviations." I went to bed and, for the first time in weeks, slept a deep, dreamless sleep. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and painfully beautiful, a perfect storybook day. I bypassed my usual coffee and breakfast, my body running on a pure, clean adrenaline that was more potent than any caffeine. I dressed slowly, methodically, putting on my charcoal suit like a suit of armor. Each piece: the silk shell, the tailored jacket, the sharp trousers, the understated but expensive leather pumps, was a deliberate choice, a statement of intent. I checked my reflection one last time. The woman looking back at me was not the hesitant, conflict-averse girl I had been for so long. Her eyes were clear, her expression calm and resolute. She looked like a woman who owned a castle and was about to foreclose on a fairy tale. I arrived at the Willow Creek Manor 2 hours before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, parking in a private spot at the back of the estate. I entered through a service door, the key feeling solid and real in my hand. I met Mr. Davies and the head of security, a calm, competent woman named Maria, in the manager's office. The infamous Bob was there, his face a mask of nervous excitement. He had been fully briefed that morning on the true identity of the anonymous investment firm. The look of dawning comprehension and sheer, unadulterated glee on his face when he realized who I was and what was about to happen was a perfect appetizer for the main course. "Miss Evans," he said, shaking my hand with a newfound reverence. "It is an absolute honor. We went over the plan one last time. The string quartet had been instructed to play their normal prelude music. The officiant was in place. The guests, who were now beginning to arrive, were being seated. I watched them for a moment on the security monitors, a rogues gallery of enablers. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family, friends, all of whom had witnessed Chloe's behavior over the years and had chosen silence, had chosen to keep the peace. They were not innocent bystanders. They were the silent chorus that had allowed the lead actress to run rampant. Maria's team was in position, their earpieces discreetly in place. 3 were near the main chapel doors, 2 were near the bridal suite, and 1 was with me. Mr. Davies held the black binder, the day's sacred text. Everything was ready. From a small window in the office, I could see the groom, Mark, standing at the altar. He looked handsome but terribly young, a lamb waiting patiently for the slaughter. I felt a brief, fleeting pang of pity for him. He was a fool, blinded by a pretty face and a manipulative personality, but he was more of a casualty than a primary target. My true targets were in the bridal suite, basking in the final moments of their reign. I could almost hear Chloe's high-pitched laughter, Brenda's sycophantic praise. They were on top of their world, secure in their power, completely, blissfully unaware that the ground had already been sold out from under them. "It's 5 minutes to showtime," Maria said quietly. I took a deep, steadying breath. "Let's begin." The strains of a string quartet playing a gentle, classical piece filled the air. It was Pachelbel's canon, the most traditional of wedding processional songs. The irony was exquisite. The 150 guests seated in the beautiful old stone chapel turned in their seats, their faces expectant, smiling. They were ready for the show. They were about to get one, just not the one they were anticipating. At the altar, Mark straightened his tie, a nervous but happy smile on his face. He looked towards the grand, dark wood doors at the back of the chapel, waiting for them to open and reveal his bride. The officiant, a kind-faced man in his 60s, beamed at the assembled crowd. My father and Brenda were in the front row. Brenda looked like the Queen Mother, resplendent in a sapphire blue dress, her face a mask of smug triumph. My father just looked anxious, his eyes darting around, a man perpetually bracing for an impact he could never quite predict. From my position in the vestibule, just out of sight, I could feel the energy in the room, the collective breath being held. Mr. Davies stood beside me, a silent, grey-suited spectre. Maria was a few feet away, her eyes scanning everything, her posture relaxed but ready. The music swelled, reaching its crescendo, the cue for the bride's grand entrance. The ushers, 2 of Mark's college friends, moved to the doors and pulled them open. And then, I walked in. I walked alone. The music faltered for a second, the lead violinist's bow skittering on a string before correcting itself. A wave of confusion rippled through the chapel. A low murmur started, a sound like rustling leaves. I saw heads turning, people whispering behind their hands. I kept my pace steady, my eyes fixed on the front of the chapel. I wasn't looking at the guests. I was looking at Mark, whose happy smile had frozen and was now melting into a puddle of bewilderment. I saw Brenda's face curdle, her perfectly painted lips twisting into a snarl of disbelief. I saw my father's face drain of all color, his expression one of pure, unadulterated shock. He looked like he had seen a ghost. In a way, he had. The ghost of the daughter he had willingly sacrificed for years now returned to haunt the feast. I walked with a purpose they had never seen in me before, the sound of my heels on the stone floor a steady, deliberate beat. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was simply inevitable. I was the consequence they had never imagined they would have to face. The murmur in the crowd grew louder as I reached the front of the aisle, stopping a respectful 10 feet from the altar. The quartet, confused and unsure, finally let the music die out, leaving a ringing, stunned silence in its wake. And in that silence, from the side door leading to the bridal suite, came a shriek. What is going on? Why did the music stop? The doors to the bridal suite burst open, and Chloe stormed out, a vision in white lace and pure, unadulterated rage. Her face was a thundercloud, her meticulously applied makeup unable to hide the fury in her eyes. "What is she doing here?" she shrieked, her voice echoing in the silent chapel. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "I banned you. I specifically, explicitly banned you. Security. Get her out of my wedding. Now." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Mark looked helplessly from Chloe to me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Brenda was on her feet, her face a mask of indignation. "Vanessa, what is the meaning of this? You are ruining your sister's special day." This was the moment. The culmination of everything. I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to Maria, who spoke quietly into her wrist. I then turned my calm, unbothered gaze to Chloe. "Actually," I said, my voice clear and carrying easily in the stillness, "the security team works for me." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Chloe stared at me, her rage momentarily replaced by sheer confusion. "What are you talking about? Are you insane?" "The staff at the Willow Creek Manor also works for me." I continued, my tone conversational, as if explaining a simple fact. "The wedding planner, the string quartet, the man who resodded the lawn for you last week. In fact, everyone on this property works for me." I let that sink in. My father was now standing, his face ashen. "Vanessa, what have you done?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. I ignored him, my focus entirely on Chloe, who was sputtering, trying to form a coherent sentence. You're a liar. This is my venue. Dad paid for it." "He paid a deposit." I corrected her gently. "He paid a deposit to the previous owners, but the balance, the full, final, and rather substantial balance, is due today, to the new owner." Mr. Davies, on cue, stepped forward and opened the black binder. He held it out for me. I took out the top document, a single heavy sheet of paper. "This," I said, holding it up for all to see, "is the deed of ownership for this entire estate. The Willow Creek Manor. It was purchased 6 weeks ago by a company called Second Act Holdings, LLC, a company of which I am the sole proprietor." I paused, letting the full weight of my words land. "Welcome to my property, Chloe. I'm so glad you could make it." The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum of shock and disbelief. Then Chloe found her voice again, but it was no longer a shriek of rage. It was a high, thin wail of panic. No, you can't. Dad, do something." My father simply stared at me, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrified understanding. He finally saw. He finally understood that the quiet, pliable girl was gone, and in her place was someone he didn't know at all. "The wedding you planned is, I'm afraid, cancelled," I said, my voice retaining its cold, precise calm. "You are now trespassing. However, because I am feeling generous, I will give you an option. Mr. Davies has the final, itemized invoice for the event you requested, including the Hawaiian orchids, the premium champagne, and the team of dove handlers who are currently waiting by the West Fountain. The total is $276,450. If you can transfer those funds to my company's account within the next 10 minutes, we can proceed. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you, and all of your guests, to please vacate the premises immediately." The aftermath was even more satisfyingly chaotic than I had imagined. Chloe's face, a canvas of disbelief and horror, crumpled. The bravado, the arrogance, the years of unshakable entitlement, all evaporated in an instant, leaving behind a panicked, lost-looking woman in a very expensive dress. 200 and... Dad, she wailed, turning to our father, her voice cracking. Pay her, and make her go away. My father looked at me, then at the invoice. Mr. Davies was now holding out to him and then back at me. He looked like a man who had been struck by lightning. Vanessa, we can't, he stammered. I don't have that kind of money just lying around. We can work something out. A payment plan. I'm not interested in a payment plan, I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. The terms are non-negotiable. Payment in full. You have 8 minutes remaining. Brenda, who had been frozen in place, finally snapped into action. She marched up to me, her face contorted with fury. You malicious little bitch, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me? I interrupted, a genuine mirthless laugh escaping my lips. You have done nothing for me. You have spent 20 years doing things to me. You have tolerated me, belittled me, and erased me. Consider this my formal resignation from the role you cast me in. Maria, my head of security, took a subtle step forward, positioning herself between me and Brenda. Brenda, sensing the shift in power, fell silent, her chest heaving. The guests were in an uproar, whispering frantically, many of them already pulling out their phones to record the most spectacular wedding implosion they would ever witness. Mark, the poor, forgotten groom, finally spoke up. Chloe, what is happening? Is this true? Chloe just sobbed, a messy, ugly sound that had none of the performative grace of her usual tears. The 10 minutes ticked by in excruciating, delicious silence. At the end of it, I looked at my watch. Time's up, I announced to the room. I nodded to Maria. She spoke into her wrist again, and her team moved with quiet, calm efficiency. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice projecting through the chapel. I regret to inform you that due to a failure to render payment, this private event has been cancelled. We ask that you please gather your belongings and exit the chapel in an orderly fashion. Thank you for your cooperation. The security team began gently but firmly ushering the stunned guests out. There was no shouting, no physical confrontation, just the irresistible force of polite, implacable authority. My authority. I watched as my family stood, isolated, in the center of the now emptying room. Brenda was trying to comfort a hysterical Chloe. Mark was standing apart from them, his face a mask of dawning horror, as he realized the true character of the woman he was about to marry. And my father. He just looked at me, his face a ruin of regret. Why, Vanessa? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why would you do this? I held his gaze for a long moment. You should have dropped the music box, Dad, I said softly. You should have defended me when she stole my paper. You should have told me I looked beautiful in any dress. You should have told her that I was not your first mistake, but your first daughter. You did none of those things. This is not something I did to you. This is the logical result of everything you failed to do for me. I turned without waiting for a reply and walked, for the second time that day, down the long aisle. But this time, I walked away from them, towards the open doors and the bright, beautiful sunshine of my own damn life. The epilogue of Chloe's fairy tale was not a happily ever after. The public humiliation was absolute. Within hours, videos of my speech and the subsequent evacuation of the wedding were all over social media. The story was picked up by local news blogs, framed as the ultimate bridezilla gets her comeuppance tale. Chloe and Mark broke up less than a month later. Apparently their bond wasn't strong enough to withstand public ridicule and the loss of a massive, non-refundable wedding deposit. Chloe and Brenda retreated from the public eye, their social standing in tatters. My father attempted to reach out several times. He left long, rambling voicemails, swinging wildly between anger, pleading, and a sort of pathetic self-pity. He never once offered a genuine apology, only excuses. He still couldn't see his role in it all, still couldn't understand that his inaction was an action in itself. I didn't answer his calls. I sent him one final text. I need space. When you are ready to have an honest conversation about the last 24 years, and not just the last 10 minutes, you have my number. I haven't heard from him since. As for me, my life has truly begun. I quit my job at the bank and poured all my energy into the Willow Creek Manor. I rebranded it, renovated it, and turned it from a failing legacy asset into a premier, highly profitable event space and boutique hotel. Bob is still my general manager, and his loyalty is absolute. We run the business with a simple philosophy: competence, respect, and absolutely no tolerance for arrogance. My relationship with Sarah is stronger than ever. She was my first official guest at the new manor, and we celebrated with the finest champagne, a bottle I had personally selected. I am happy. It's a quiet, steady happiness, not the loud, performative kind Chloe always chased. It's the peace that comes from taking control of your own story, from refusing to let others write your lines or define your worth. Sometimes, when I'm walking the grounds in the evening, I think about the choice I made. It was ruthless, it was dramatic, but it was also necessary. It was a declaration that I would no longer be the collateral damage in someone else's life. You see, they thought my power lay in my silence, in my ability to endure. They never realized that my true power was in my patience, my intelligence, and the fact that I was keeping meticulous records. So, if there's someone in your life who consistently underestimates you, who sees you as a background character in their grand drama, let my story be a small reminder. The quietest person in the room is often the one you should be paying the most attention to. They're not just listening, they're learning, and they might just be planning to buy the castle.